We took a hiatus once, but I guarantee you and all our fans, we're not going to Kwity again.
I'm not going to make any guarantees, but we're here now, right? We have the Kwity Paye, we have the Kwity Paye draft evaluation and scouting report. Our first D end, we just got done doing 10 running backs. If you haven't seen those videos, make sure to click the playlist link above my head. But no, let's just hop right in, Mike. So obviously there's some question marks here when you just look at his stats, right? Um, Only 11 and a half career sacks. A lot of people are going to see that and think that's a red flag. Obviously, I think you and I both were more on the caring about disruption than actual sack production because that only measures so many of the snaps where you even had a chance. But are you concerned about this sort of smaller sample size that you've seen here out of Kwity?
Yeah, definitely concerned, but kind of just with the stats in general. It's kind of like we saw it this year with the Defensive Player of the Year argument: Aaron Donald versus T.J. Watt. Everyone went right to the stats. T.J. Watt, look at him, look what he did. You can't compare what an outside linebackers tackles comparative to a D tackle, and if they're even comparable, then the D tackle should get that 9 out of 10 times. And we probably would both lean, Aaron Donald, but the rest of the people seem to lean TJ Watt. And that's kind of with Kwity Paye. The stats definitely don't jump off the page, but at least watching film, you definitely saw disruption. He was definitely there in plays and a lot in the run. Super impressed in the run. So like a lot of times he did great with, containing the edge, pushing his blocker on the inside. And, he doesn't get that tackle, but that safety or that linebacker gets that tackle. So it doesn't show up in the stat sheets, but he made plenty of plays like that. He saw it on a pretty consistent basis. And that's one thing I will say about Kwity Paye, which these stats wouldn't really show up, but consistency, at least off the film I watched.
I completely agree with that. Yeah. He had 25 pressures in the first 3 games this year alone. That's insane. That's we're talking almost 9 pressures per game, which is madness. And even though that only turned into 2 sacks, he's making the plays, just maybe not the tackles. And I think that that's something that you can kind of see as you get in my grade here. Grades out positively in a lot of areas. Probably the only one where I would say there's real question marks is in that finishing tackling department. But obviously that is what it is. Otherwise, explosiveness and quickness, he's really solid compared to a lot of other edge rushers that we've seen. I think he might not have the quickest get off, but his lateral quickness in terms of when he's playing as a 5 tech slanting into that B gap where he can kind of just work inside and outside quickly there and win matchups off that. As Mike said, where I thought he was best was actually in terms of setting the edge and really just forcing and funneling all the plays back inside, sort of making those plays and letting the linebackers and safeties make the tackles. That's really where he impressed me. He almost reminded me of last year we saw like AJ Epinesa, but that was all he did, right? Kwity, he also he combines that with being a really solid pass rusher as well, which is why I think we both think pretty highly of him. In terms of his flexibility and bend, I think that there's still some that we could maybe work on here. A lot of his sacks aren't necessarily him just blowing by the tackle upfield, and that's going to happen even less at the next level. So I wouldn't say that he's necessarily going to be some team's premier number 1 pass rusher, but more so just a very solid defensive end in general, if that makes sense. Do you kind of agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I would have probably just if I was you did the grades, but just kind of my thoughts. I'd have taken down flexibility and bend. You definitely didn't see him doing it very often. When he did, he didn't look that flexible. But I'd probably the grade would probably end up being right around the same because I would give him more in hand usage. I thought he actually did pretty good when he was engaged at times. I think he did a really good job at disengaging and using those hands. And um, I think a lot of times he beat tackles just by pure just hand battling and whether it be a swim move or just a rip. So I would have given him a little bit higher grade in hand usage. But no, I totally agree. I think there's a lot to work on, but I think he has a high floor, and I think that's out of all three of the DNs we're about to be doing next, which are currently in the first round conversation. I think he by far has the highest floor, and I don't think it's relatively close.
Yeah, so what I'll say about the hand usage thing, because that might be a little bit confusing. This is our first DN video, as I said, so I haven't really explained the scale yet. But when I'm saying hand usage, I mean more as a pass rusher in terms of your moves. I thought he could improve a little bit there, just in terms of maybe rushing with a plan a little bit more often. It seems like a lot of times what he's doing is just stabbing those hands right in the chest, and that's really good. That's great hand placement. That's why I actually gave him a good grade on the block deconstruction, because almost every play he's getting hands inside and can kind of shed from there. But I don't know how many pass rush snaps he's going in with a plan and then a counter and then a counter to that. I don't see a lot of that. I see him getting stuck every now and then, which I think you can improve on that, which is a positive. You can't teach some of his other traits, but you can most definitely teach the hand usage and technique. So that's why I graded him a little bit lower there. I just wanted to see him kind of get unstuck, if that makes sense, primarily in those pass rushing reps. When he does know, though, that it's 100% a pass and he can kind of pin his ears back and get upfield, that's when he was really dangerous. I know Mike and I were both kind of impressed that late in that Minnesota game, he was just getting after the quarterback play after play. It seemed kind of bending that edge a little bit more. I would give him credit for than you had, and then kind of getting pressure on that quarterback, just making him feel uncomfortable in the pocket. But no, otherwise, I think he plays with good leverage. He does have really good block recognition. I know a lot of people might be kind of confused with what that means. Like when the tackle goes to reach him, he does a good job of maintaining that gap integrity, fighting back to the outside, and really never getting displaced from his gaps. That's what I mean by block recognition, because a lot of other ends, I should say, when you go to reach them, for example, they're just going to take the easy way out and go inside to that B gap. Well, now, hey, there's a toss outside of you and there's 27 yards. So Kwity does a good job of recognizing that early, combating against it, and as we said multiple times now, just limiting everything off that edge. So Mike, overall, you said you agreed with the grade. We did want to talk a little bit about the sort of position premium that I have here, because people might see the 80.25 and see the grade key and think that I'm saying Kwity's like a mid to early second round pick. One thing that I wanted to note is like that's just the raw grade. Whereas if you were actually making a big board and actually comparing all these guys, you would need to account for the position that he plays for. So every team would do that differently depending on how much they value that particular position. For me, it would probably come out to his final grade would probably be like an 84. So in that sort of mid first round range. Mike, do you agree that that's where you would put him? Obviously, because I know people might see that and think we're saying he's not even a top 45 guy, but you agree that he could be taken in the mid teens of the first round, correct?
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you there. And kind of just going off, yeah, position. Like I think there is a premium there, especially at the end. And kind of taking a step back, and we can kind of even get into the charts a little bit. But kind of when you're going off block recognition, having that really nice block recognition and awareness, I think, and he has really nice size. And definitely strength. I think that gives him position versatility. I think he can play inside, whether it be a 3-4 D end or, even in a 4-3. I think he can play that 3 tech at times, especially in passing downs. And I think he'd be more than, adequate. And I think actually that might be a really nice thing for him is to move him around the defensive line. And Michigan actually did I thought, a good job of utilizing him in that way. They did utilize him in different positions across the D line. So just something I want to bring out there, just versatility. I don't know. We really don't have a grade for that, but he offers it.
No, most definitely. I know I didn't really have a comp for him in terms of who I think he sort of plays like, but the way you brought that up, that sort of reminds me of say a Brandon Graham. Obviously, he went to Michigan, so that's sort of a lazy comp. But I think the way the Eagles use Graham in terms of he can play the 5, play the 4, and hey, when it is a third and long, maybe we'll move him in to that 3 tech role as he's sort of done later in his career, and that's where he's actually been incredibly effective. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see whoever drafts Kwity place of value on that versatility, because as you said, he could pretty much play anywhere 3 out, and that is pretty useful when a lot of these other edge guys that are sort of these stand-up pass rushers, they're constrained to only that edge spot, and then you see some of that usefulness start to wane a little bit depending on the game flow. I don't think there's a situation where Kwity's not a positive, impactful player on your team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got it. Like my comp, and this is going to seem really lazy because we are Lions fans, but I think Trey Flowers actually. I think Trey Flowers is not. It sounds pretty high because he's a $17 million a year DN, but overpaid by far. But at his best, especially with the Patriots, he was used in different positions. He maybe not the most flexible, bendiest DN, but good motor. Hands out there, good strength, and using him in different areas shows that's the best of Trey Flowers, and it doesn't always show up in the stat sheets, but definitely productive. So.
No, I like that a lot. I like that a lot because when you think of Trey, you think of more of the technician type guy who pretty much every play, as we talked about with Kwity, starts with him getting his hands into the opponent tackle guard's chest and sort of setting the tone there, and then making plays off that. And I do think you see that a lot in Kwity's game. So, with that being said, Mike, obviously we don't have anybody to compare him to yet. That's going to come in future videos in terms of Jalen Phillips and Gregory Rousseau. So if you guys are interested in seeing those videos, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell us, how do you think Kwity grades out, especially on that sort of scale here? Because obviously some people might disagree and say he's a top 10 guy. Well, tell me, how does he get there? Where do you think points should have been added, subtracted, etc.? But no, is that all you got, Mike?
I think we mic'd up and we micing out. Deuces.
Peace, guys.